Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We are presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got good friend of the program, Cole Zwicker, on for his weekly appearance. We are going to be talking about the Michael Porter injury. We're going to talk Lonzo Ball. We're going to talk the Boston Celtics out on a 15-game win streak right now with two guys in the starting lineup that are 19 and 21 years old. And then we're just going to do some very brief, quick, early NBA draft impressions. Some guys like Trae Young, Tyus Battle, Allonzo Trier, Grayson Allen. I've really liked what I've seen from Brandon McCoy as well. So we're going to just kind of go with those guys. But first, Cole, how's it going, buddy?
Doing okay, man. It's a really weird basketball night, especially in the NBA with Bulls-Lakers as the only game on the docket, just what the people wanted, I guess. But I'm excited to talk some college basketball and for these Thanksgiving tournaments, even though the Porter news is kind of disheartening.
This has to be the worst night of college basketball of the year, doesn't it? Like, it just has to be. Or NBA basketball, I'm sorry. NBA basketball.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when's the last time there's been a single game and this is the main attraction? It's pretty ridiculous.
Lakers, Bulls, gotta love it. But, yeah, let's talk about Michael Porter. So Michael Porter is going to be having back surgery. I don't think he's already had it. I think that, he's having it today or tomorrow. What this is he's having a microdiscectomy where apparently they have to get rid of some fluid out of one of the upper discs of his back. And that sounds dangerous because, of course it is anytime you're talking about back surgery. Porter is, for many, the number 1 overall guy in this draft. I have him at number 4 on my board right now. I'm not going to overreact really one way or the other until we learn more about the injury. But Michael Porter's Missouri career, unless he decides to come back for a redshirt freshman season, is going to be over after just 2 minutes in a game against Iowa State. So what were your initial impressions when you saw this news, Cole?
Well, it's just unfortunate from a personal standpoint. I really enjoy watching him, following him through high school, and just not having the ability to see him this year is, disheartening. You're missing out on one of the elite talents, and for somebody who watches college basketball basically entirely for prospects, it's unfortunate. As far as his draft stock, I have a hard time seeing him fall too far, out of the top 5. I think the sample is too established. His performance at the Hoop Summit, at All-Star Game circuits, and the high school level, guys have seen him enough to where that size, athleticism, and shooting package is probably still going to be too much to pass on. What do you think?
So, yeah, I kind of want to just run through all of the events that Michael Porter has gone to where there has been NBA personnel at that event, scouting him, watching him. And this is not an exhaustive list, by the way. I would imagine there are probably a couple more. The 2017 McDonald's All-American Game, the 2017 Nike Hoop Summit. Both of those events have long spates of practice throughout an entire week. 2017 Adidas Nations, 2016 U18 FIBA Americas Tournament. Multiple USA basketball camps from, I believe, 2015 onward. The Nike Basketball Academy, I believe out here in 2016 he was here. He might have been out here in 2015 as well. Just a lot of events that Michael Porter has been at where he's been scouted by NBA personnel at this stage. They know him as well as they know any other elite prospect. In a year of watching him in college basketball, yeah, you might be able to learn a little bit more just because he's going against better competition on a regular basis. But at the end of the day, they're only going to be able to learn so much. They have so much information already at their fingertips. They have hundreds of shots cataloged in different databases that they have access to. People, I think, would be a little bit surprised by the amount of analytics teams have on high school kids. They have tons of film to go through on his high school and AAU circuit events. The lack of sample is not going to be the issue with Porter. The issue with Porter is going to be the injury. How does that affect him going forward? It's supposed to be a 3 to 4 month injury. That means he's going to be fine to go through the pre-draft process and everything like that. So if I was a fan of a team in the top 5, I would not really be all that worried yet. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to how often how does this work? How does this, injury affect him coming into the pre-draft process? Does it sap his athleticism? Is there any sort of issue here? And in a minute, I will get into some of the longer-term stuff. But before I do that, I just kind of want to hear where your, more detailed impressions are.
Yeah, it's interesting from a draft leverage standpoint, from an injury sharing perspective. because we see two top markets potentially in the top 5 of the lottery in Chicago and Dallas. Porter can control the medical information availability and could potentially leverage his destination. We've seen this in the past. So that's just kind of an interesting subplot to all this. I don't want to immediately go there and think about that element of it. I hope he gets better.
I think it's worthwhile too.
But yeah, it's an interesting point because, again, we've seen this historical precedent. And if he can drive his way to a Chicago or a Dallas, he might try to do that.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree that was one of the first things I thought of. It's one of the first things I tweeted about is that, he holds all of the cards now. Like, he is going to have control. His team is going to have control over his medical reports. I'm sure he won't go to the NBA Draft Combine. There's just no real benefit to him doing that. We all know what his game is. We all know what he can do. So he gets to pick and choose who gets the medical information. And, a team could decide to take a risk on a guy with a back injury and just take him at number 3. Like, one of those teams that you didn't mention could easily decide, hey, we're just going to select him. We think he's that good. Okay, I'm sure you've seen him enough to be able to make that determination. Who knows with the back stuff. And one point I want to bring up with the back stuff is that Jeff Stotts from In Street Clothes, he's one of the, more well-renowned, I guess sports injury doctors and sports injury data analysts out there. He has a database of past injuries. And within that database, you can see that nearly 3 of every 4 players to undergo disc-related surgery report additional back problems at some point during their career, with several players requiring a subsequent procedure. So that has to be concerning from an NBA perspective. It's worth pointing out that he goes into several other factors that could play into Porter's favor, saying that, it's better when the injury is higher as opposed to a lower back injury. Porter's injury, I think, is a little bit higher on the back than what some of other players have gone through in the past. Also, age. Younger players have had a slightly better track record of getting back from this injury and not having as many issues in the past. So that's all good, but the idea that 3 out of every 4 players have continued to have back issues has to be concerning for every NBA team.
Yeah, that's really good information. How do you value this into where he could go in the draft? Do you still think it's possible he goes number 1 overall, or is the risk too great for the reward at that spot now with more established players like Doncic already proving themselves at a high level? Is it too much to vault him number 1? I know you have him number 4. I can't decide if I think teams will still gamble on him that high. He might drop to the 3rd or 4th or 5th spot, but I can't see him falling that far.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's not a great answer for a podcast, but until he gets in front of NBA teams and starts going through workouts and starts getting tape of himself out there doing really ridiculously athletic things, I think it's really, really difficult to tell, and it's really, really difficult to even begin to get a gauge on where his draft stock could ultimately lie. And then there's also that additional factors we mentioned earlier, where he could wield a relative amount of influence by withholding his medical reports. He now has become one of the most fascinating NBA draft prospects that I can really remember. And it's going to be so interesting to see how all of these factors kind of play out. You mentioned to me you kind of want to run through a top 10 on just kind of where we slot in all of these guys. I will say that, like Michael Porter, this doesn't really change things for me. So I would love to hear your opinion. Where do you have Michael Porter after this news?
So right now I have him in the same kind of – I have a tier 1A with Luka Doncic and then tier 1B with Michael Porter 2, DeAndre Ayton 3, and Mo Bamba 4. All those guys are pretty fluid. I think anywhere from 2 to 4 I could see the argument. It depends on how well the other players perform, of course. If Ayton really starts dominating on the defensive end, we see more offensive upside from Bamba. I could see them passing up Porter. If Bagley performs perimeter skills like we've talked about in the past, if he shows – the skills he needs to show, I could see him vaulting him as well. I think it's pretty fluid, but there gets to a certain point where the upside is just worth the risk. We saw that with, I'm not comparing him to Joel Embiid as a prospect necessarily, but just certain prospects, the upside is too high. Granted, we have credible medical information. We're operating, from the sidelines here. We're just making, approximations based on our own observations and assessments of his game. But yeah, I can't see him falling out of the top 5 for me personally. What about you?
I mean, it's possible. I'm not making like grand proclamations about this right now. I'm just going to continue to have him at 4. I currently have Luka Doncic, DeAndre Ayton, Marvin Bagley, and Michael Porter Jr. in my top 4, followed by Mohamed Bamba at 5. Sitting at number 6, I've got Jaren Jackson. Number 7, Miles Bridges. Number 8, Colin Sexton. Number 9, Kevin Knox. And number 10, Bruce Brown. In terms of tiers, I would say that the top 4 are a tier. I would say 5 and 6 are a tier. And then 7 on down to probably 16, 17 for me is a tier. So that's kind of where I'm at on this draft. I am not quite as high on Mo Bamba as what a lot of people are. I get the appeal, but I'm just a little bit skeptical still. I need to see him prove it a little bit more. Again, like Porter, I think is going to be the most interesting prospect now in this draft. You can make the case that we find out some stuff about DeAndre Ayton, or we, learn about Marvin Bagley, or Mo Bamba becomes this guy who plays hard every single possession, night in, night out, and vaults that category. But right now, I'm just kind of holding status quo, I think.
That's fair. And to round up my top 10, I have Jaren Jackson 5, Marvin Bagley 6, pretty interchangeable there. And I kind of feel like that's a mini tier. And then you get into this albatross of Miles Bridges, Wendell Carter, Colin Sexton. I have Lonnie Walker and Troy Brown kind of on the precipice of the top 10, both of those guys. Of course, we haven't seen too much of Walker, but what I have seen is really intriguing. Followed by guys like Bruce Brown, Villanova, Bridges, Robert Williams, Mitchell Robinson, Kevin Knox. That kind of fluid tier, and that's pretty interchangeable. At this juncture, I don't really have a hardline stance on any of those guys. I feel the best about Jackson and Bagley from what I've seen. Really a big fan of Bridges. So, yeah, we'll see based on the information to come.
Yeah, we'll talk about Big Bob Williams later in this podcast. I also want to talk about DJ Hogue at some point, because his shots looked really good for the first few games, and now it's totally left him. Just to kind of bounce off of that, because I have the Texas A&M game on in the background right now. Let's move on. Let's talk about some NBA stuff. You mentioned that you want to chat about Lonzo Ball. I'll let you take this one. Where do you want to start with Lonzo Ball?
So my overarching question to you is, how concerned are you about his shooting? And I'm just going to provide some statistical context here, because I just wrote a piece on this for the Stepien and kind of contextualized all of his numbers so far. So his aggregated shooting numbers through Summer League preseason and the regular season, for three-pointers, he has 30 of 129, so that's 23.2%. From the foul line, he has 33 of 53, 62.2%. And the issue with me is kind of like, I know the guys have to adjust to the NBA three-point line, and guys, closing out with better length, more athleticism. But this was a guy who was already really adjusted to the three-point line in college from NBA range. He took 67 threes between 24 and 30 feet above the break at UCLA, 34%. So for some context there, Steph Curry, his junior year, was 18 of 50. Damian Lillard, his senior year, was 15 of 38. Going one level deeper, a lot of the shots that he's missed have been open shots. And you can't just dismiss them as like he's struggling against length and closeouts. Teams just aren't guarding him. We saw that even in Summer League, the first game where he played against the Clippers, where they were just going under on pick and roll. They were leaving him off ball. You've seen a lot of that this year, and most of his attempts have come on open shots. I mean, via NBA.com, I think 4.2 out of his 4.5 three-point attempts per game are 4+ feet open. And he's shooting like 24.3% on those. So he's just missing open shots. Synergy has him tagged as 5 of 25 on unguarded catch-and-shoot shots in the half court through, again, Summer League preseason and the regular season. And the tape really backs all this up. When you watch him play, teams oftentimes just don't guard him. I think what it boils down to for me is a confidence issue more than anything else. He just doesn't seem like his mental state is there. And we know that shooting can be fickle. We hear guys like J.J. Redick, say that confidence and that repetition and that mental state is the most important thing as a shooter. So I guess wrapping that all up to a simplified question, how concerned are you about Lonzo's shooting from the sample that we have so far as a professional?
Those numbers aren't good. They're not good. I'm still in a lot more of a wait-and-see mold at this stage with Lonzo. I do agree. I think it's 100% a confidence issue. Like, he's shooting under 80% from the free throw line and three-point range combined. Like, what are we talking about here? Like, this is crazy to me that this guy who's made shots at every single level of his development is now just not doing that. He's just not a capable shooter at this stage. And I don't really know how to attack that because I've just never seen a jump shot quite as funky as him. I went on the Lakers Nation podcast. Shout out to CLNS sister podcast, Lakers Nation, with Trevor Lane, and talked about Lonzo. And I think what's happening is he's starting to tinker a little bit with his mechanics because I don't think he's ever really gone through like this prolonged a slump before. And when you have as many moving parts in your jump shot as Lonzo Ball has, just the slightest tinker can throw everything else off. And he's a guy where he brings the ball up from his left side. He's a left-eye dominant shooter, but he's a little bit more of like an exaggerated left-eye dominant shooter than we've seen in the past, to the point where he has to literally kind of realign his body in air. By the time he releases the ball, he actually kind of looks like a normal jump shooter in a way because he does release it like further out in front of his head. But, you know, right now I think what's happening is he's bringing the ball a little bit lower on each kind of on each jump shot, and I feel like what's happening is it's throwing off his alignment and his rhythm as he's going forward and kind of going into his jump shot. And when that's the case, to me, it just points to confidence, and he needs to kind of figure this out on his own. And I think he will. He's a smart kid. He's a really good kid. You can't go through any sort of like massive sweeping changes on his jump shot midway through the year. This is what he's with right now. I think by the end of the year, you're going to be looking at like a 30% three-point shooter, and then at the end of the year, we kind of reassess. But for me, the much bigger concern has been he can't finish at the rim. And that was a thing that you and I talked about, and I think that a few other people talked about going into the draft process, is that he's really just not a good leaper off of 1 foot. And we're seeing that he's struggling to finish inside in a very significant way. Like, I think the jump shot will probably come around in some manner. I do not think that he has the explosiveness really to finish consistently around the rim right now.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that. And I thought that again, was foreseeable because we discussed that. We talked about his flexibility issues at the rim, the lack of explosion off 1 foot. He's just not an in-air adjuster type. But the shooting is a bigger issue for me because he needs to shoot. Like, if he doesn't shoot, his ceiling outcome is dampened a lot. Like, I expected him to not be a good on-ball finisher at the rim. I thought, of course, when he loads up off 2 feet on those cuts, and the Lakers are starting to use him a little bit better in that situation as far as operating a little bit more off the ball on cutting situations, some off-screen actions. But if he doesn't shoot, it's just hard for me to really fathom him becoming what people wanted him to be and living up to that draft slot. And it's really the last thing that I expected to worry about off the catch. I mean, again, we talked about off the dribble shooting with him, the pull up with his gather, especially attacking right, makes him predictable. His mechanics don't translate cleanly to that setting. Off the catch, though, I mean, NBA threes, shooting with range, was a big part of his shooting projection in college. That's a lot of the reason that a lot of guys were okay with his form, is because he could take those deeper shots that allow for greater time and space because you have to close out longer distances. So if he doesn't shoot off the catch and he can't play off the ball, that whole superstar role player kind of outcome is hindered a lot. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I do think it'll probably regress positively to some extent just because, again, he was such a great off-the-catch college shooter. He made big shots in big moments, and you saw that confidence with him. It's just perplexing to see this version of him just not really believe in his own shot because, again, that's the last thing that I expected to happen with him.
Yeah, and, you know, like, you have to wonder, okay, what could be the issue right here in terms of confidence? So his brother just got arrested. The issues were happening before that, though. He is probably struggling a little bit more than what he ever has in his past. That can't be something that he's used to doing. You know what I mean? Like, just full stop. Like, that's enough to make you kind of question how you're attacking the game of basketball whenever you've been so successful throughout your entire life. And, you know, his father obviously is in the news quite a bit, but that's been his deal his whole life. Like, I don't – it's just very difficult for me to try and figure out all of the factors because there are so many different factors that could be affecting this. Yeah,
and I mean, the pressure is greater than ever, probably for him in LA as a professional.
It's a great point.
he had a lot of pressure last year at UCLA. I mean, look at how much publicity he was getting as like the next Derrick Rose hybrid with I don't know, Jason Kidd. Like there was so much positive encouragement for him. I've not seen a prospect get that much hype in a while. It's just the stage he was on, and he lived up to that for the most part. Like, I thought his numbers were kind of noisy, but at the end of the day, he performed. He was on a great team. They played at a great tempo. It was a really, really nice system fit, of course. Probably an ideal college system fit for any player. But maybe he's just facing more pressure now as like the head of the Lakers organization. And we know that he's playing differently with them. He's much more high usage in pick and roll, which was never his game. Wasn't his game in high school. Wasn't his game in college. He was more of a half-court off-ball guard. That's how he's utilized, like cutting off the ball, playing in a system. So maybe he's just feeling the initial pressure of having to be kind of the face of the Lakers.
And, another aspect of that, I think, is that, this team is just so bad in terms of shooting the basketball and spacing the floor, that I think it's probably really, really difficult for him to get the space he kind of needs. I mean, he's taking a ton of shots. Like, this doesn't really have anything to do with him shooting the basketball and his efficiency issues. Maybe it does at the rim, but, this is a high-pressure situation where he has no floor spacing really around him. I think that they're last in the NBA in three-point shooting. Part of that certainly is him. But it also just doesn't help to have that many non-shooters around him as well. Like, KCP isn't shooting all that well this year. Corey Brewer's a non-shooter. Kyle Kuzma has come back down to earth. He's down to like 31% from three. Larry Nance and Julius Randle are non-shooters. Like, there are just so many of these guys that are difficult and tough shooters that he was in a much better situation at UCLA last year. I agree with you.
Yeah, that's a great point. They are dead last 30th in the league in three-point shooting. I think they're at 29% or something roundabouts there. It's a brutal setting for him to kind of maximize that open court, hit shooters in transition, be able to open up the lane like they saw against the Phoenix team in the third game of the year, where the lanes were clearly open. Lonzo got to the rim. That was mostly schematic oriented by Phoenix's defense, but just the same point stands. The lane isn't open. He doesn't have those, high efficiency guys to surround him with. So, I mean, you'd think that hopefully over time, Ingram will be able to take more on-ball usage and let Lonzo play off of him. And I thought he's improved this year. I thought Ingram was kind of disconcerting to start the year as kind of too much of a black hole. And he's really opened up his slashing game and his drive and kick game. So hopefully they can get him the ball, let him create a little bit in pick and roll, and get Lonzo moving, on the weak side, or all these cuts that he showed against Phoenix the second time they played, like back cutting Tyler Ulis. There's a lot of things he can bring to the game that'll make his scoring easier for him and the team.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. And I guess my last question to you on Lonzo is, does this really, kind of change tangibly where you are on Lonzo Ball as a long-term prospect?
A little bit, because I was operating under the assumption that he was going to be able to be at least an adequate off-ball shooter, because then you can pair him next to guys like elite level players. If LA gets, let's say, LeBron in free agency as an extreme example, Lonzo in theory would be an excellent fit next to him and kind of optimizing LeBron's game. I always thought that was the best quality of Lonzo's, is being able to make great players even better. And if he can't space the floor off ball credibly, there's just that ceiling outcome and that ability to make LeBron, for example, it could be somebody else, but that kind of player optimized is going to lessen because you're not attracting that gravity off the ball. So I'm a little bit more skeptical now than I was before. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I were a little bit lower on Lonzo than what the general consensus was, right? So, yeah, I think that I'm probably right where I was, I would say. I still wouldn't have him below Dennis Smith, because if you've been watching Dennis Smith, there have been a lot of the same issues there, except less of the tangential impact around his scoring, like his ability to make guys better through his passing and lead man the ball and rebound at a high level at the guard position. What have you thought of Lonzo's defense, real quick, before I kind of let loose on this, before I kind of give my final assessment? Because I think it's been really mixed. His issues at the point of attack still certainly exist, and that's, for me, the biggest thing that I look at in a point guard defender, is being able to contain penetration. But I'm heartened by the fact that he is pretty good at getting out and contesting guys and, kind of having a little bit more effort than we saw at UCLA.
Yeah, when he plays with high effort, he's actually a really solid off-ball defender. He defends bigs better than he defends point guards for sure. I think his weakness is clearly point of attack defense, navigating around screens. When you evolve a screen in anything, his performance defensively drops off a cliff. But when you let him kind of, he's really good at making rotations, tagging guys, recovering to contest, and he does try hard. Like in pick and roll, sometimes when he gets screened off, he'll bust his ass in like straight line sprint and block shots on these crash down attempts because he's relatively long and he's tall and he's pretty fast in straight lines. Like he can do that stuff. So I'm a little bit more optimistic. I was pretty high on his off ball defense. So I should say that has been to form. The on-ball defense, again, I don't think he's ever going to be a guy who shuts down point guards. And when you consider that with his offensive shortcomings as a penetrator, it kind of seems like he would be best served playing with a point guard who can defend point of attack as well as get into the lane. So, I mean, that's kind of the whole deal. It goes back to, is Lonzo Ball really a lead guard, or is he more of like an off-ball wing type who would be optimized, as a team defender where he's really good? Yeah,
I think that those are all really good points. Overall, I'm basically in the same spot that I was on Lonzo. Maybe I would take De'Aaron Fox ahead of him now. Okay. I think that might be the one guy that I look at. Maybe Jonathan Isaac, too. Jonathan Isaac's been really, really good under the radar, but his role is so much more diminished than Lonzo's, so maybe not. I might not go that far. So yeah, I might have Lonzo at like 5 or something like that. So, no, I'm basically in the same spot I was pre-draft where I had Lonzo 4. I think he's going to be a really, really good basketball player, and these are just some growing pains that he's going through. Before we move on, let's talk about the Celtics. The Celtics are on a 15-game win streak with both Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown in the starting lineup. How is this happening? It's kind of the best way to put it. I think that obviously defense is a big part in that, but I've been pretty shocked that the Celtics have been able to kind of keep this thing together in the way that they have without Gordon Hayward.
Yeah, I mean, that was my first question is how the hell is this happening? Because it's unprecedented, really, to have guys this young performing at such high levels and contributing to winning basketball the way that they are. I mean, clearly Al Horford's been a top probably 15 player in the league this year. He's been incredible for them. Kyrie Irving is their primary guy. He hasn't been consistently great, but he's had great performances for sure.
His clutch performance is insane this year. Like he's averaging like 60 points per 36 minutes and like shooting like 63% from the field. It is insane what Kyrie has done in the clutch. That's ridiculous. And I mean that alleviates a lot of the pressure off Tatum and Brown, of course. And they've just been I've been really impressed with both of them, just in their ability to fit in the team construct. I thought that the Tatum is like a ball hog, like black hole, mid-post, isolation scorer, summer league was just bullshit narrative. So it's good to see him kind of perform in the ways that I thought he could contribute to a team, but he's been way better than I thought as far as, I never expected him to be this caliber of shooter from the off the catch. He's been fantastic from 3. His shooting splits are ridiculous. Jaylen Brown, his effort level, like against the Warriors the other night, just busting ass defensively, really owning his role. It's a testament to that organization, to Stevens and their ability to develop talent. I think in the draft, as far as evaluating guys, when players go to the Celtics, you have to give them the benefit of the doubt now, because we've seen them turn players that had, dicey college careers. Tatum was definitely solid. Brown was less so, but that was situational to a certain extent. These guys really know how to develop guys, put them in a system that is going to make them thrive. Well, yeah, I think the Celtics do a better job than most teams, probably. Maybe not than everyone, but they do a great job of drafting to their scheme, more so than drafting the best player on the board. And that's what I always talk about when I say that I am a big fan of drafting for fit. I am a big fan of drafting for scheme, not for position. You know what I mean? Like some people think that drafting for fit is, we need a point guard, so we're going to take a point guard. That's not what drafting for fit is. Drafting for fit is finding the right guys who are going to thrive in what you run consistently. And that's what Jayson Tatum does. Jayson Tatum is a great mover off the ball. He's a guy that is I always thought that he was a little bit more unselfish than you did. I'll say that. Just kind of seeing some of the stuff that I'd seen in the past. So I do understand why you would get that impression, though, from watching him in college. The stuff that's been most heartening to me, though, is the fact that he's shooting more threes and knocking them down at as high a clip as he is. That fact is a huge, huge part of his ability to become like an all-star caliber player. If he can continue to knock down threes at that ridiculously high level, level, he's going to be an incredibly effective basketball player, to the point where I think that he is almost certainly going to be an all-star if he's hitting 45% of his threes right now.
Yeah, I mean, and his ability to not use possessions and just kind of operate off ball, like you noted, make the extra pass, situationally hunt mismatches. So Brad Stevens will play those guys if they see a mismatch and they see a big matchup. That's what gives them so much versatility, is because both Brown and Tatum have enough on ball. Tatum's better on ball, but they both have enough to where they can exploit smaller two guards. And their defense, their switchability in that scheme, just their ability to defend in space has been fantastic for them. That's kind of the key to Boston's defense, is just being ultra versatile with guys like Marcus Smart. They can really switch. They can guard, fours with these guys. Jaylen Brown and Tatum are both strong enough to hold up in most matchups against NBA fours. And again, I think that the scheme point was absolutely spot on. They identify what they can utilize and optimize, and that's what they've done with both of these guys.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. What have you thought of Jayson Tatum's kind of floor game? Because I was always a big fan of the way that he rebounded the basketball. I was always a really big fan of, some of his switchability defensively. What have you thought of all of the rest of that kind of game?
Yeah, I mean, the rebounding was obvious in Summer League especially. I mean, I was high on his rebounding coming into the draft, and he passed well enough to where I thought that he could at least fit in a team construct. Okay, I didn't think he was a high-level passer, but he's definitely shown to be more of a willing passer than I even expected him to be. We haven't seen too much. I mean, he situationally will handle the ball in isolation still, and he's capable. I mean, he has some shake with that mid-range jab step. He can get to his spots. We haven't seen a ton of high-level creation from him because he hasn't needed to do it. It's not really an indictment on him, but you see a lot of guys who are like, I told you Jayson Tatum was the number one prospect because he's a self-creator, you know what I mean? And that hasn't been what makes him successful in the league. That's not a knock on him. He's really, the testament to him is he's been able to fit both sides of the ball in a team construct. So his floor game, I think his off-ball movement, like you noted, he has a good feel on like slip cuts where he'll read the defender and or in a side screening action, he'll just dart to the rim. And that's already high-level stuff for a 19-year-old. So that's where I've been most impressed probably is his off-ball movement, his ability to space the floor, of course. I mean, I, again, never expected him to shoot this well from the off.
What about Jaylen Brown?
Yeah, he's impressed me a little bit more just playing within himself. I mean, I think he started the year, his first 3 games, he only had 1 turnover or something. So he's played more in line with what they want him. Corner 3-point shooter. He'll attack a closeout. He will post up occasionally in mismatches. Sometimes he will run an isolation. Again, when he has a mismatch, Stevens does a really good job of targeting those things and putting him in positions to succeed. I'm not totally sold in his defense yet. I get the upside. He has all the athletic upside in the world. His motor sometimes is ridiculously awesome. His off-ball defense, sometimes, I mean, personifying things for him, he'll close out and like leap at a guy for no reason, and the guy will take a 1-dribble pull-up, but he's still athletic enough to where he can land and then second jump and almost block the guy's shot. So that kind of sums up his defense. I think it's a little bit more of a work in progress off the ball than a lot of people think. But on the ball, when he's engaged and he doesn't, jump at things, he can stay in front of anybody, and he has the physical strength to really contain dribble penetration.
Yeah, it's been a little bit weird, the narrative surrounding his defense, because I think I agree with you. He's not as good defensively as what I think he gets credit for being defensively. But again, He's so young that I'm just like, okay, whatever. If he's already like an average league defender with those tools, he's probably going to be really, really good defensively. The rest of his game, I tend to agree with kind of everything you said. The jump shot, though, I think is the swing skill. Right? Like he needs to be probably a 35% 3-point shooter. He can knock down shots from the corners so that the rest of his game, kind of attacking closeouts and doing the rest of that stuff, kind of works a little bit better. Right? So what have you thought of the jump shot that you've seen this year?
I think it's fluid enough, especially from the corners. I think he was 44% from the corners last year. I think Zach Lowe tweeted that. So he does well in certain situations. I think off the dribble, I'm not a really big fan of his shot. He doesn't really need to have that in this game. I mean, it'd be nice. He can hit a corner 3. He can get to the rim in 1 dribble, and he can explode and finish over anybody. It's weird that he's such a poor finisher. He's always been kind of a poor finisher statistically. When you can't dunk, it's just a weird. It's always been like a weird phenomenon to me. I know he doesn't have great touch and his body control is only okay. I wonder if that improves over time. I talked to a lot of Boston guys who are like, yeah, he's really young. He'll get stronger. It's like he's already pretty strong. He's already pretty developed. It's like I don't think that's really the problem. I think that it's more of a touch issue, which is strange. But if he's dunking shots and he gets a clear lane to the basket, attacking a closeout, that's not as big of an issue. It's just a bigger issue when you get fouled. You can't convert free throws. But to answer your question specifically, I'm a little bit more bullish bullish on his shot now. I think that with time and space from the corners, especially in that offense that generates him good looks, he relocates to the corner pretty well off ball. He's learning that ability. So if he can cut and he can shoot a corner three and that unlocks his dribble penetration game on closeouts, that's a valuable player.
Yeah, the finishing ability to me has always been more body control. Like he's kind of just like a bull in a china shop. Almost like he just wants to go straight line to the rim every time. Like you don't see anything like super creative in terms of kind of hanging in the air and Euro steps. Like you'll see them occasionally from him, but it's not like a consistent thing that he can bust out. So I think that that's more the issue, and I don't know if it's because his hips aren't like wild fluid. They're like a little bit fluid and he can do some stuff, but he's not, I don't think it's a Harrison Barnes situation where his hips are straight and he can't do anything but attack in a straight line and cross over right to left. Everything is lateral and nothing is diagonal with Harrison Barnes because of his hips. I don't think Jaylen is that bad, but I do think that there's a little bit of stiffness there from time to time, and I wonder if that will improve, but I think that there will be some growth at least just due to, learning the way that defenses at the rim attack you. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. What do you think about Tatum's finishing so far? I have a pretty good sample, but not a great feel for it. Obviously, he doesn't have great explosion, but it's been decent. I think statistically, last time I checked, it wasn't great. And you can kind of see the issues that we thought, or at least I thought going into the draft, with that lack of like explosion. He doesn't have the best hips either. So what are your impressions there?
So I don't even know that it's hips with Jayson Tatum because he is so fluid in a lot of different ways. Like he actually can kind of do some stuff with like his Euro step is really, really good already.
Yes.
With me, the bigger thing with Tatum is the lack of explosion. And the other thing that I typically used to mention with him is the idea of he's more of a long jumper than a high jumper. Like sometimes I think that in college he took off way too far away from the rim, and that caused some issues for him. This year, overall, he's shooting 63% at the rim, which is pretty good. A lot of those shots are assisted, though. So I agree with you that he needs to improve on how he finishes when he's driving to the rim, especially if you're expecting him to be a superstar where you already have Boston writers saying, I wouldn't trade this guy for Anthony Davis. It's fucking crazy. But having said that, I am a big fan of just about everything I've seen from Tatum so far. If you're averaging 14 points and 6 rebounds and playing good defense and hitting 45% of your threes and, kind of doing everything really, really well within a team construct because you're an incredibly emotionally intelligent teammate and human being, it's hard to nitpick for me. Maybe he can't necessarily be like a top 5 player in the NBA, but, I'm bullish on his ceiling, and I always have been. I had Jayson at number 2 on my board last year. I think that he is just, a remarkable, remarkable basketball player.
Yeah, there's not really much to bitch about with him right now. I mean, he's been phenomenal for a rookie. I've always been more bullish on his floor. That's why I liked him so much, and I probably didn't give his ceiling enough credit. So if he's going to shoot like this, that changes his projection pretty considerably for me. He was always a decent bet to shoot relatively well. I didn't see him doing this, and it's a good bet to regress some. Just the level that he's shooting at right now just seems unsustainable, but it passes the eye test, and that's the thing, is like he looks fluid enough doing it. And the main takeaway for me with both of these guys, just really quick to wrap up from my end, is they just try really hard, and that's a product. Yep. Some of them, it's some of the system, because the Celtics have, I guess, the conceptual depth to make these guys play hard. But it's also them. Like they are willing to do this stuff. They're willing to do the small things. They play hard on both sides of the ball. And I think that Tatum has issues containing dribble penetration, containing closeouts as far as initially reacting to guys. But he's playing so damn hard. He recovers and blocks a lot of these shots. So, just that level of effort is erasing a lot of the shortcomings for both of them.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Like, trying hard is an underrated NBA skill, especially in the regular season. Let's move on. But before we do that, We're going to talk about our two sponsors today. MyBookie is our first sponsor here. You need holiday cash, and I know where you can get it. MyBookie is the place to score serious cash on your sports predictions. Believe it or not, the holidays are just around the corner, actually 2 days from when this podcast is being recorded. And while that means plenty of parties, gifts, and spending, it also means there's a lot of football, basketball, hockey. You can score big every day. I am sitting here as we record this podcast, sweating out Texas A&M minus 4.5 against Penn State with 3 minutes left. So I'm right there with you guys. Man up and play like the pros on game day. You can play the money line, side, or total. MyBookie is your hookup for all of your betting needs and offers super fast payouts when you win. Where you bet is just as important as who you're betting on. And if you want to make money betting the games, you've got to go to mybookie.ag. They're the only site that I would recommend. I trust them, but you don't have to take my word for it. Check them out for yourself. They have odds on every single matchup, and a mobile site that just makes wagering on your smartphone or whenever you're out with your buddies just so easy. And you know, if you join now, MyBookie is going to match your deposit with up to a 50% bonus. Use the promo code Game Theory, GAMETHEORY, to activate this offer. Visit mybookie.ag today. You play, you win, you get paid over at MyBookie. Our second sponsor is DraftKings. Listen up, Hoops fans. Basketball season is back, and now that your favorite hardwood heroes have returned to the action, it's time for you to put your fantasy knowledge to the test to win huge cash prizes every night playing one-day fantasy basketball at DraftKings.com. At DraftKings, there are so many ways to play. Choose from public contests with huge cash prizes or private contests where you can compete against your friends. They've even got beginner and casual contests where you'll play against people of similar skill levels. The best part, you get to draft a new team every day, and drafting a team is arguably the best part of fantasy. The only thing better, winning cash doing it. There are huge cash prizes and bragging rights every single night only at DraftKings. Use the code CLNS at DraftKings.com to play free with your first deposit for your share of $10,000 in total prizes tonight. Don't wait. Use code CLNS at DraftKings.com now to choose your lineup, and you can seriously cash in tonight. That's code CLNS only at DraftKings.com. The game inside the game. Cole, we're going to talk about some NBA draft stuff. Just early impressions that you've had at the beginning of the season. Where do you want to start? I'll let you kind of pick while I recover from those ad reads.
Let's go with Trae Young. He's the biggest early season mover for me. Just a guy who really pops on film talent-wise. I wasn't as familiar with him as you were. I knew about the pull-up shooting from range. I knew about that kind of element to his game. I did not know about this level of handle and burst. This combination just really stuck out. I watched the Ball State game, and it was like considerable. I thought he was more shifty with the ball than even a guy like Duval and Sexton as far as weaving in and out of space. I don't know if you saw that one sequence where he had a pick and roll, tight space handling sequence where he split the double and pick and roll and then immediately crossed up the big two. It was like a sequence that was like bang, bang, and he got to the rim. I mean, the finishing is an issue. I'll get to that in a second, but just the impressive having a ball in the string handle. I think he has legitimate burst. The vertical athleticism is not there, but just watching his skill level, he just really stuck out to me. The way he creates space to get to his pull-up stylistically. I'm not saying he is these players, but it just reminded me of the sequence of Steph Curry and Damian Lillard, like that kind of, being able to dribble, go in and out, weave, and then just pull up on a dime and shoot. Obviously, the shooting is the release point, a little bit low, gets a little elevation, shoots more out than up. Harder to shoot over contest that way. We've already seen that manifest in the 3 games thus far. Split the finishing off 1 foot, not sold on that at all as far as any kind of dynamic vertical athleticism. He seems pretty unrefined attacking the rim right now. Shot selection, I mean, playing with the ultimate green light at Oklahoma, so he takes some really low percentage contested jumpers, and he doesn't have the efficiency to match his production in the flash plays. But the flash plays for me are just considerable. I don't know what you think about him. And you again have seen more of him than I have entering the season, but I was pretty blown away from where my expectations were.
He's definitely exceeded expectations wildly. I think that's the first place to start here. The burst was always really difficult for me to judge, just how quick he was. The handle I thought was always there. He does have a really, really tight handle, and it really helps him create space for his jump shot. The lower release point, concerning. I think he can knock down shots, though. We're going to learn more about that lower release point and how concerning it is later on in the year whenever he plays against some athletic opponents. Really, we're going to find out about it later this week when they play at PK80. So before we get to there, though, I want to talk about the burst, because I think that is the biggest standout skill that has surprised me and that has really stood out to me in a significant manner. He really is just kind of weaving in and out against guys right now. Like he is proven the ability against like mid-major, low-major competition to just kind of blow by defenses in a way that I didn't really know that he could do, even at that level. So I am very, very impressed with that. I think that the handle and the ability to move in tight spaces is really important. And I mean, we have to talk about the passing, because I didn't really know that he could pass like this either. I thought he was a good passer, a guy that would be able to create looks for teammates kind of playing off of his jump shot, because he might be able to attack closeouts and kind of attack guys playing up too tight on him with his tight handle and get by them and create for others that way. He's just a full-on awesome passer right now. Like, he looks awesome moving the ball to his teammates. I think he's leading the country in assists so far through 3 games I think they've played now. I've only seen 2 of them, but I'm really, really impressed with Trae Young. I agree with you. The key for me is going to be, can he do this against long defenders? Can he do this against actual high major competition? Because I don't know that yet. That's always been my concern with him. That's always been the biggest worry with him from anyone who's seen him. Can he do this consistently against super athletic players? I don't know. I think that we're going to find out, though. And he certainly has the attention of a lot of NBA folks.
Yeah, he's just, again, somebody that really, really pops. I agree with the first step. Kind of from a standstill, his burst from that area is, I think it's really solid. Just watching him on film, I mean, he can stop really well. He's got great agility with the ball, changing directions. If you look at how his game translates to the NBA, and like a pick and roll setting, if he can get that workable deep range pull up 3, which he has, that was what he was notorious for coming into college. And he can pair that with the ability to get in the lane, kind of dart in between defenders, and then that passing craft you talked about on driving kicks, really workable vision there. I mean, he makes some high-level kick-out passes. Sometimes he misses guys because he tries to force floaters or whatnot. It's hard to see him becoming really a 3-level scorer almost, just because he doesn't have that burst, that explosion off one foot. But maybe he develops more craft. We've seen guys that aren't that athletic vertically develop these push shots, these off-balance runners. If he does that, I mean, he can threaten enough as a 3-level scorer to really open up the floor for his team. And if he can separate, again, like you noted, against better athletes, longer athletes especially, in pick and roll settings, and we get a better idea of if a player can duck under a pick and still recover to his shot, even at that range, I just see a lot of workable skills here that make him a really alluring prospect.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not going to belabor him too much, though, until we see him next week at PK80, just because I do think there are some, significant things he has to prove. But like I said, the eyes are on him immediately, just given what he's done so far. The next guy I want to talk about is Tyus Battle. How much Tyus Battle have you seen so far this year?
I've seen a decent amount, enough to have some kind of formidable opinion, I guess.
What have you thought? Because I had him in the first round coming into the year. Like I was super high on Battle. I had him like at 22 or 23 on my board. He's exceeded that expectation for me offensively so far. So I want to see kind of where you're at in thinking what he can be on the next level.
He looks really comfortable knocking down pull-ups. He has good burst, especially attacking closeouts as well, but also from a standstill. He looks to have a solid first step. He's created space, a lot of getting to his step back, and he's used picks a lot better than I thought he could. Rejecting, has some deception, setting up the picks with hesitation moves. So that aspect of his game, I mean, he has taken some pretty contested, low percentage shots and isn't the most willing passer. And, of course, has that hitch in his shot that make you a little bit dicey on that projection. But he looks confident shooting. He's been a better offensive player than I expected for sure as a self-creator, creating off the dribble, especially getting to the rim at times, but more so just getting to that pull-up game and showing that acumen. That profiles well for like a secondary, maybe handler type, if he can get that off the dribble shot going. Yeah,
I think that's a really interesting kind of role for him. And, it's hard to kind of look at his defense in any substantial manner at Syracuse just because they play that zone. But in high school, he was known as a hard-nosed defender. That was where he kind of made his mark. He was a guy that really got into you and played both ways. So I like that aspect of him as well. The fact that you can kind of trust him to hopefully play both ways on the next level. The shot creation has been the biggest thing to me, and the ability to play in screens and the ability to attack closeouts and the ability with his jump shot to just hit shots now. He's hitting, I think, 42% from three. Let me pull up the number. It's 43% from three on 21 attempts, so not a lot, but he's at 5 attempts a game and hitting that at a really, really high clip. The only step that worries me for him is that he needs to pass the ball more. He really just needs to be a better passer in any capacity right now because he's not that at all. And with guys like him who you're profiling as secondary creators, third, fourth options on teams, you really need them to be able to make the extra pass and to be able to make the smart pass. And I don't know that he's proven that yet. We'll see, though. I mean, he's playing with a lineup of 3 other freshmen and Frank Howard, who's not a very good point guard. So, we'll see what happens. I'm very interested, though, in what I've seen from him in the early going.
That's exactly the point I was going to make as far as making the extra pass, keeping the chain moving. You want to see more of that from him. He does miss teammates in his field of vision, taking sometimes double team pull-ups. You want to see him just move the ball for a higher percentage shot because that's really all he needs to do. He doesn't need to be a high-level pick-and-roll passer. If he can make spot-up threes, attack a closeout, and make a simple read, that'll be huge for his game. I agree. That's the area that I'm looking for from him the most.
The next guy I want to move on to is going to be actually, let's just do these two together. Let's say Allonzo Trier and Grayson Allen. We know so much about these guys already that I'm just kind of interested to hear your perspective on if anything has changed for you with them.
Well, I mean, Grayson Allen was just batshit nuts against Michigan State. I think that if anything's changed, he might be able to get his shot in more diverse ways than I originally thought. Just his shot making on a second unit might be legitimate. Quickly setting his feet off pin downs, off movement, body control as far as off pin down curls, pulling up over contests, dribble handoffs quickly off 1-2 footwork. There was a lot of things he showed in that game from a diversity of shot creation kind of standpoint. He's athletic enough to I think, get to his spots in a pull-up oriented manner. So that is what really stuck out to me. Maybe I underrated his overall shot-making upside. With Trier, it's kind of the same general thought I had before. He's been ultra efficient, 6 of 6 at the rim in the half court thus far, 8 of 13 on pull-ups. He's been an efficient college scorer. There's nothing to really take away from him there. I don't think he's shown really that much in pick and roll as a passer. He's made some simple passes and a couple skip passes that were kind of interesting, but for the most part, he's just been an efficient scorer. And if he maintains this against better competition, you have to give him credit for that. You have to build that into your analysis. If he's going to be this level of scorer, then I'll probably have him in the top 40 or so. I view them kind of similar prospects. I think this is probably what you're getting at in grouping them together as far as just being more efficient kind of shot-making types that might struggle defensively and there aren't really creators for others at a high level, but maybe can just be good enough to make the extra pass.
Yeah, I've liked what I've seen from Trier this year, making that extra pass, being a better passer. They're occasionally playing him on the ball as a backup point guard just because they don't really have anyone to feel super comfortable about behind Parker Jackson Cartwright. So I like the fact that he has shown the ability to at least find teammates in a bit more of a coherent manner. He's making every single goddamn mid-range shot right now, it feels like. And I wonder if that changes whenever he plays against teams that can take that away from him in a more substantial manner. But he's always just been so efficient that I think he won't let that affect him as much as it would potentially other players. I'm a really just big fan of Trier in general. He's a really, really emotionally mature kid. Really, really, you can tell, intelligent kid that I am always struck with whenever I hear him speak or when I speak to him, as I did over at The Athletic last week. Grayson to me is kind of the same guy that he was, I guess. He's reverted to sophomore year Grayson, where he's not injured and is not tripping dudes. So, okay, Grayson is a late first round pick, I think. I don't know that there's anything different that Grayson is doing. We know that he can get really, really hot shooting the basketball. We know that he has the ability to create off of closeouts due to that shot making ability and due to the fact that he's actually a little bit shiftier than what I think he gets credit for. His shoulders are really broad and he can do some stuff with them to kind of create space whenever he gets guys like on his side in pick and roll settings or whenever they attack wild and, come out just like slightly out of position. He can get them on like his shoulder and get them on his hip and really just they can't do anything about him at this level. Maybe they can in the NBA because he doesn't have a crazy amount of lift, whenever he's crowded. But we'll see. To me, they're both like late first-round picks, and I don't know that we're going to see anything too different from them going forward.
Yeah, I'm with that. I think that sums it up pretty well.
How much Brandon McCoy have you seen so far?
Him, I got to today, finally. Watched most of his clips, mostly on Synergy, so I haven't seen a full game as far as any kind of defensive evaluation for the most part. So basically just his offensive game. Loves getting to that left-hand jump hook over his right shoulder. I've been really impressed with his touch, most of all, just around the basket. And this is probably stuff he's shown in the past. I think we alluded to this when we talked about him briefly on the preview episode. But I also believe in his mid-range shot. I think he's shown some fluidity from there. He can finish. I mean, mostly he's killing teams like Rice on these post duck-ins. He's been all over the offensive glass. But he has shown legitimate skill, I think, as a touch shot maker. It's just you consider, again, the noticeable lack of pop and traffic is there for sure. I mean, you can see that against even lower-level competition. And my question is kind of like he's a bit turnover prone. I don't know how good his hands are. He has a couple drop passes this year that were just really makeable catches that you want to see him convert in space. I don't know if that's an issue or if that's just a small sample size theater question mark. But I'm a little bit higher on him. I still see him the same as before pretty much, outside of maybe his skill game is a little bit better than I give it credit for.
So he's playing like 22 minutes a night or so and averaging like 20 points and 12 rebounds right now. Like he's been insanely productive. Yep. I have no idea what to expect whenever they play real opponents because the lack of lift is concerning. He's just really quick though. Like he moves really, really well at 7 feet tall, 7'1", 250 pounds, and it allows him to run the floor. And if he's running the floor and establishing early post position and ducking into the post, as you mentioned, and I agree with you. I think the touch is actually really good. Like I think that he just straight up has good touch. So the hands worry me. Will the rebounding stick? All of this stuff is very real, but he's been incredibly impressive in the limited minutes that we've seen him so far, just slightly under 100 minutes.
Yeah, and I'm glad you noted the changing ends. He has looked more fluid running in the court than I expected him to, and that's a big part of his game. If he can play at a higher pace, he doesn't get too fatigued, and he can exist in that higher pace setting, that's big for him because, I mean, that means he's not necessarily like a plotting center, even though, again, the lack of lift. If he can be mobile enough to stay on the court and play at higher pace, that's huge.
Yeah, like he kind of strikes me as like a backup center who just runs the floor like crazy and gets easy baskets in the NBA. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's going to happen. Like, I don't know if that's going to end up being what he is, just because we need to see him prove it against better competition. But he was a guy I was relatively low on coming into the year who has been really, really good early in the year. 3 more guys, one junior, one sophomore, one freshman. Chimezie Metu. I've seen him a lot out here, so I'm just going to kind of take this one. He's legit shooting threes now, and that's a huge development. He's been awesome as a trailer three-point shooter, and if he can hit those shots, he's probably an NBA player. If he can be just a bouncy-ass pogo stick who can block weak-side shots and who can shoot from all 3 levels and hopefully finish at the rim and finish way above the rim, which his skill set would indicate his ability to do so. He kind of strikes me as like what people were hoping Bryce Johnson could be. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. I think his mechanics look pretty solid from what I've seen. Not a lot of input. It's more of a set shot with a slower release, but he has made those trail threes like you noted. He looks comfortable shooting them. I watched a little bit of the Vanderbilt game. He had a plethora of kind of foul line extended face-up ISOs, really mixed results there.
Oh yeah, like very mixed, very, very mixed. But what I will say is that he's really, really good as compared to last year at creating open looks. I think he still gets too far out of control, but he has the burst to get by guys in a significant way.
Yeah, he looked fairly coordinated to me on these spin moves. The defenders were biting on a shot fake, and he was really, attacking those open driving lanes. He had one wicked kind of post footwork sequence against North Dakota State that I saw on the left block, but he has not been efficient there. He's been utilized there a bit, so that's not going to be his game. I'm not concerned about that at all. Workable left hand finishing around the rim, and then defensively, his closeout range and speed contesting corner threes especially has been really impressive. Has really stuck out. He can really cover ground quickly and can block shots with either hand from the weak side. So I think that Bryce Johnson, if Bryce Johnson could shoot threes and fill a role defensively as a weak side rim protector, he has a role in the NBA. And if Metu is going to shoot threes, that changes the complete trajectory of his prospect.
Before I move on to the sophomore, I wanted to just ask you about Benny Boatwright. He's a person that I get asked about a lot. I am someone who likes Benny and wishes the best for him, and I know he's worked really, really hard on his game and on his body particularly. He's totally changed his diet and looks in a lot better shape right now. What are your thoughts on Benny going forward to the NBA?
Honestly, the best memory I have of him was in the tournament last year, where I thought he, gave Semi Ojeleye kind of the business in certain spots, and that was actually the reason I was lowest on Ojeleye, was because of that matchup with Boatwright. So I haven't watched him too closely this year. I don't know about any kind of improvement, so I'll leave that one to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of what I just said. His body looks a lot better. He looks a little bit bouncier, looks a little bit quicker laterally, which is exactly what he told me NBA folks told him he had to do. He needs to now figure out how to defend. Just full stop. He has to defend. If he doesn't defend, he's not an NBA player. He's got a 60% true shooting percentage, is averaging 18 points a game, 7 rebounds. So everything is up across the board right now for him. The defense, he just doesn't really know where to be yet. And in year 3, that's a little bit worrisome. But again, I also think he needs to be a 40% three-point shooter, and right now he's at 35%, and he's been a consistent 36% three-point shooter throughout his entire career. So I would like Benny to continue to get better. I would like him to show scouts and me and everyone who does this that he can be a good team defender, even if he's not going to be a difference maker defensively. He just needs to get there, and I don't think he's been there yet. Before we move on past him, or after we move on past him, Big Bob Williams, Robert Williams over at Texas A&M, played his first 2 games of the season in New York. I think it was at Barclays Center in that Legends Classic, I want to say. So he played Oklahoma State, played Penn State today. So Penn State's actually kind of a sneaky good team, I would say. It wouldn't surprise me if they ended up making the NCAA tournament. Oklahoma State is awful, but he has been really, really good in his first 2 games. He's doing basically exactly what he did last year, just on a more consistent basis so far. What have been your thoughts? I guess you haven't seen either of his 2 games, though. But in general, what are your thoughts on Big Bob?
Yeah, I have the Oklahoma State game recorded. I'm going to watch that tonight, so I'll have much more up-to-date info after that. But my thoughts are, he's an NBA prospect. He's a legit NBA prospect at the 5. He can change ends. He's super athletic. He's a pogo stick as a leaper, high-level shot blocker. He has a shooting outcome that is within the realm of possibilities as far as pick and pops from mid-range, potentially spacing out to 3 in time. I thought he's been an underrated passer historically. He makes some interesting high-low reads, some flashes on the move, but not too high level. What I really want to see from him is more of the physical big man elements of his game. So as a screener, actually setting screens and not just diving really fast to the rim, which he's definitely capable of. He's a gravitational lob catching threat, but I want to see him actually physically hold screens, hold that point. And, that goes for boxing out too, seeking out bodies, being physical on the interior, showing NBA teams that he might be actually able to anchor a defense instead of just kind of being this, versatile rim runner type who can play both sides of the court, but really he might get beat up on the glass due to lack of technique. He might not be able to play the 5 full time. So that's my biggest issue with him is teams, are they going to view him as a 4 who can situationally swing to the 5? Because that lowers his projection. I don't think he has good enough ball skills to play the 4 full time as a starter. So I want to see that more physical nature from him on the interior.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I also will just say that I don't think he's really improved as a shot creator this year. I don't think NBA teams are really going to be asking him to do that. He's going to be more of that screen setter type who, rim runs and grabs offensive rebounds and gets his points that way, hopefully from the foul line as well if the shooting outcome comes through. I'm pretty worried about the fact that he just isn't doing a whole lot of the little things so far. I had him at 14 coming into this year on my draft board. Basically going to keep him there. The productivity is good. I'm glad that he's taken that leap forward. I'll be interested to see if Texas A&M starts implementing some more ball screen action when J.J. Caldwell re-enters the fold. Their starting point guard who is out with, I believe, a DUI suspension for 5 games. So maybe that ends up being something that, proves him more to NBA teams. But we'll see. The last guy, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Averaging, I want to say, like 19 points a game right now. Has there been anything different than what you expected from him so far?
Not really. I still don't have a great perception of his ability to create off the dribble. Most of his input has come off the catch, and that's reaffirmed certain things. Like he had a really nice play against Washington where he sprinted to the opposite corner, caught the ball on the move, quickly elevated for a 3. That kind of stuff is what's going to make him a potential first-round pick. When you pair that with the ambidexterity finishing around the rim, I think he's a pretty decent decision maker. I think he's got good intellect from what I've seen in person, high skill level. I don't know about his burst. He's obviously not vertically explosive around the basket, but he makes up for some of that with craft. I'm not necessarily sold on his role yet, but I do think that if he can shoot off screens, he shot over contests. Like his mechanics are kind of weird, but they work. He can shoot pretty quickly, and he's shown to be able to shoot over contests with length. So that's a big part of his game. So I think I already had him top 25, I think, and I'm pretty much the same until I get more input about his self-creation ability.
Yeah, 100% agreed with all of that, I guess. I would say that the thing that has impressed me most with him has been the just actual ability to knock down shots. He's hitting 45% from 3 on 6 3-pointers a game. He's making that extra pass very, very easily. He's 6'5" with a 6'10" wingspan. He profiles reasonably well defensively now that he's put on some more bulk. 60% from 2-point range has also been heartening. Like he's actually doing a really good job of finishing at the rim. He has that really smooth left-handed layup kind of deal going on where he's able to finish with both hands, not just his right hand. Not an above the rim finisher by any stretch of the imagination, but anytime you're shooting 53, 45, 76 from the field in 4 games, and he's playing Houston Baptist tonight, so I don't think that those numbers are going to go down by any stretch. It's an impressive start worth noting, especially when you're averaging, like I said, 19 points a game to start.
Yeah, he's been productive, and he's doing things that translate. He's making NBA caliber shots, and that's what I like to see from these shooter types. He's making translatable shots, and for me, he's one of the guys that has done that consistently thus far.
Cole, is there anyone else you want to talk about, or is it time to get out of here?
Man, I'm pretty good. I'll say I agree with your Robert Williams take. I have him in the same range. I know some people had him even in top 7 consideration, even in consideration for the number 1 pick. And I don't see that necessarily. I think the idea of him right now is probably better than the reality, but he still is a really high-level prospect. I do like him a lot as a 5-man.
Cole, tell the people where they can find your work and anything else you want to tell them before we get out of here.
Sure. As usual, to check out the Stepien. I just published a piece today on kind of putting Lonzo Ball's performance thus far in context and looking at how LA can better optimize him more off the ball in ways that UCLA was really good at. So check that out on the Stepien and continue to tune into this podcast because, again, I predominantly podcast here. I also have joined Sean Darenthal on the Ode to Odin podcast, so we will do a podcast there about draft prospects, some young NBA talent, probably once a week. We'll see, so check that out as well.
You should all go follow Cole. He does a great job covering the NBA draft, the NBA, basically all sorts of basketball levels. I kind of do the same thing. This has been the Game Theory Podcast. We're presented by CLNS Media. Remember, please go subscribe to The Athletic. Keep me employed. That would be excellent. Our sponsors today have been DraftKings and MyBookie. For MyBookie, use the promo code Game Theory. GameTheory. And then for DraftKings, it's CLNS. So keep it locked here. We'll be back at some point next week talking about everything that we typically talk about on this podcast. So until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.